Hello, and welcome to tonight's telephone town hall with Congressman Mike Levin. During this event, we'll be taking questions from constituents like you. To ask the Congressman a question, please press star 3 on your telephone keypad. You can also press star 6 to subscribe to our email newsletter. Again, press star 3 to ask a question and star 6 to sign up for newsletter updates. With that, I'll now turn the call over to Congressman Levin. Congressman, welcome. The floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening, and thank you for joining my telephone town hall. When I was first elected in 2018, I made a commitment to hold monthly town halls to hear directly from you and answer your questions. I've kept my word, and I'm proud that this is our 134th town hall. I host in-person and telephone town halls for all constituents who want to ask questions and hear about my work on behalf of our district. We're seeing record participation at the town halls, and I appreciate your engagement. Tonight, I hope to answer as many questions as possible and to discuss current events that are impacting our district, state, and country. I also want to welcome our guest speaker, Justin Unga, the Vice President of Public Affairs for the national organization End Citizens United. End Citizens United's mission is to fix our democracy by getting big money out of politics and protecting the right to vote. They're dedicated to overturning the Citizens United decision, which is the Supreme Court case that allows unlimited money in politics and campaigns without any accountability or transparency. Justin is a political strategist with 20 years of experience leading successful legislative efforts and electoral campaigns. He previously worked for the Human Rights Campaign, where he helped pass pro-equality measures like the Respect for Marriage Act. Prior to that, he worked on Capitol Hill for several members of Congress and served as the Deputy Executive Director for the Arizona Democratic Party. Welcome, Justin. We look forward to hearing from you about the Trump administration's actions and their impact on our democracy. To ask a question, press star 3 at any time. To subscribe to my e-newsletter, press star 6. First, I want to address today's Supreme Court decision to weaken the Voting Rights Act. In a 6-3 ruling along ideological lines, the court weakened an essential protection that has been the foundation of minority representation in American democracy for 60 years. This decision makes it easier for politicians to choose their voters rather than voters choosing their politicians. The result will be a Congress that looks less and less like the country it's supposed to represent. The ruling moves us further from the promise that every American deserves an equal voice in their government. Voters will feel the consequences as soon as November's midterm elections. Now we must continue to fight to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act to strengthen voting rights and ensure voters are the ones to pick their leaders, not the other way around. Next, I want to discuss this past weekend's incident at the White House Correspondents' Dinner held at the Washington Hilton. That event could have turned into a scene of mass casualties if it hadn't been for the incredible efforts of the Secret Service and other law enforcement agents. Their quick actions prevented fatalities, and I thank them for their extraordinary work and service. They are the best of the best. And I want to be very clear. There is no room for political violence in our country. None. We do not solve our political differences with guns and knives. We solve them at the ballot box and with our voices. We all have disagreements and we have different opinions, but political violence is never the answer to resolving them. While I might not always see eye to eye with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I always strive to find common ground and ways to work together on issues that impact all Americans. That's always been important to me, and it guides everything I do. I urge all of us to think about how we can reach out in respectable ways to our neighbors from different political parties or ideologies and try to find things we have in common. By talking to one another and being respectful to each other, we can start to tear the walls down of division. To ask a question, press star 3 at any time. To subscribe to my e-newsletter, press star 6. Next, I'd like to focus on the ongoing war in Iran. We're approaching the 2-month mark since the start of this unauthorized war, and the Trump administration has not briefed Congress about why it initiated the war or how it plans to end it. This should concern every American. The Constitution grants Congress, and only the Congress, the power to declare war, not the president. The founders did this intentionally. They vested Congress with the authority to initiate war because it would ensure the input of the American people. Under the War Powers Resolution of 1973, the President must get authorization from Congress before sending troops into action, and it also forbids the armed forces from remaining in military action for more than 60 days. That 60-day deadline is important because we're going to reach it this Friday, May the 1st. After that day, any continued military action in Iran will be unlawful without explicit congressional approval. I voted several times for a new War Powers Resolution to end this war and limit the ongoing actions. Unfortunately, it has failed, at least until now. Let me take a moment also to address a dangerous argument that I've been hearing from some, that the War Powers Act somehow allows the President to take whatever military action he wants for up to 60 days. That's not what the Constitution says, and it's not what the War Powers Act says. The War Powers Act reporting requirements and limited exceptions to repel a direct attack on the U.S. does not give the President 60 days to do whatever he wants. No serious reading of the law allows the President to do what he's been doing in Iran. This unauthorized war is now impacting all of our lives. We've seen gas and energy prices skyrocket. We've seen the average price for a gallon of gas in California go up about $1 since the beginning of the war. Gas prices, in fact, are at their highest level in 4 years. Energy costs have also increased by about 13%, and they'll continue to rise as the war in Iran disrupts global oil and natural gas production chains. All of this, of course, is forcing millions of Americans to make tough decisions. People are already struggling to pay their bills and having to choose whether to pay for gas, electricity, health care, or rent. It really is unacceptable. I recently introduced new legislation, the Energy Bills Relief Act, to lower energy costs by expanding access to clean, affordable, renewable energy. My bill would expand the access to clean energy sources, modernize the electric grid, help families afford their energy bills, and ensure that large energy consumption facilities like data centers pay their own costs. The Energy Bills Relief Act is a consumer-first energy affordability strategy that's supported by now about 140 of my colleagues and growing every day, and I'm working hard to get more on board. I'll keep you updated as this bill moves through the legislative process, and you can follow on social media for the latest. To ask a question, press *3 at any time. To subscribe to my e-newsletter, press *6. Two ongoing themes of this administration that should concern all Americans that I've been highlighting for several months are corruption and pay-to-play. It's been widely reported that the President has personally benefited from the office of the presidency to the tune of billions of dollars. The President and his family have been able to profit off numerous ventures, including licensing their name overseas, crypto businesses, investing in companies that do business with the government, legal settlements, media mergers, real estate, and more. Additionally, the President's sons sit on the board of numerous companies that have been granted no-bid government contracts worth tens of millions of dollars. Recently, Eric Trump boasted about a $24 million contract the Pentagon awarded a robotics firm, Foundation Future Industries, where he serves as a chief strategy advisor. It's just one example of how the family businesses are profiting off taxpayer dollars. There are many more, and these dealings must be scrutinized. Unfortunately, the administration continues to blur ethical, legal, and financial lines without the necessary accountability and oversight, and far too many of my colleagues are refusing to do a thing about it. An issue that I've been deeply engaged in is betting on prediction market platforms like Polymarket. Before the military strikes on Iran, a Polymarket account placed a bet on the fall of the Iranian Ayatollah just 71 minutes before the news broke publicly, when the market had it at a very low probability. The account walked away with over $500,000. We've seen way too many of these contracts on prediction platforms relating to war and death and anonymous bettors that are earning literally millions of dollars on these bets. Currently, there are too many loopholes that allow for the exploitation of prediction markets, especially on issues that have consequential impacts like war. We must close the loopholes. That's why I introduced the Death Bets Act, a bill that would explicitly prohibit betting on any contracts that involve or reference terrorism, assassination, war, or an individual's death. Congress must pass this legislation to make these types of bets illegal. And I'll keep you updated on this bill as it moves forward. As a reminder, to ask a question, press *3 at any time. To subscribe to my e-newsletter, press *6. Finally, I want to highlight the abuse of the presidential pardon power and what is, unfortunately, a pay-for-pardon scheme. Presidential pardons are supposed to be a tool for justice and mercy intended to further the public welfare. But currently, this pardon power is being pushed past the breaking point. The president has used this power to pardon convicted criminals who are narco-traffickers, scammers, abusers, insurrectionists, and more. These are people with extremely serious criminal records who pose a danger to the American public. As soon as he entered office in January of 2025, the president pardoned the January 6th insurrectionists. Sadly, many of them have gone on to commit more crimes and are back in jail. He also pardoned not one, but two people whose companies or whose families had donated to him. For example, he pardoned Paul Walzak, the Florida healthcare executive who was convicted of tax evasion for siphoning more than $10 million in payroll taxes from doctors' and nurses' paychecks. Walzak also just happens to be the son of Elizabeth Fago, who donated over $1 million to a pro-Trump super PAC. The list goes on, and these recent pardons show that the presidential pardon system is broken. That power must be reformed and limited. I'm the co-sponsor of a constitutional amendment that would limit the presidential pardon power and ensure that criminals who may cause harm to the American public are not pardoned. Currently, there are no checks on the president's pardon power, and it's ripe for abuse, and we need this amendment to prevent its misuse. I am fully aware of the difficulties of passing a constitutional amendment and the fact that many in the president's party will block it every step of the way, but we must start this discussion. We must raise awareness about these pardons and the potential harm they could inflict on Americans. Now I'll turn it to Justin for his remarks on how all of this corruption is impacting our democracy. Justin?
Thank you, Congressman. Hi, everybody. I'm very glad to join you, and I'm grateful to the Congressman for his invitation to be in community with you all. My name is Justin Unga. I'm the Vice President of Public Affairs at End Citizens United. We are an organization that fights to get big money out of politics. We have about 4 million members across the country who believe, like I imagine most of you believe, that there is far too much money in politics. Our organization was born out of a Supreme Court decision 16 years ago concerning how campaigns get paid for. It was called Citizens United versus the Federal Elections Commission. The ruling in this case was one of the most consequential decisions to impact our democracy since the history of our democracy. In this ruling, the conservative majority of the court reversed 100 years of precedent by saying that corporations are people and that money equals speech. This effectively opened the floodgates for unlimited spending in our elections, as the Congressman said earlier. Billionaires and corporations were free to go to town. This ruling put a for sale sign on our government, and it put a price tag on our democracy. To put it in perspective by the numbers, before the Citizens United decision, billionaires spent about $16 million in the 2008 election. Fast forward to the last election, billionaires spent $2.6 billion, with a B, dollars to impact the outcome of the 2024 election. One more time. Billionaires spent $2.6 billion to impact the outcome of the 2024 election. Today, 1 out of every $5 spent on elections is being spent by a billionaire, and that's money that we are able to trace. Think about this with me. If that is what billionaires are spending to get their friends elected, imagine how much a campaign might cost for someone who doesn't have access to billionaires. What does that do to our democracy, our representative democracy, where we are supposed to be able to send somebody from our communities to the halls of Congress? And so that's why our organization is called End Citizens United. We believe that government belongs to the people, not just wealthy people, but all people. We believe that billionaires should not be allowed to have more power over our elections than the average person. And we believe that corporations should not be allowed to buy politicians. And by the way, politicians should not be getting rich off of kickbacks from special interests in corporations. Which is why I don't mind saying that our organization, and Citizens United, we can call it ECU for short, I know it's a handful, ECU has a bit of a crush. We're kind of longtime admirers of Congressman Levin. And it's not just because he invited us. There are very, very, very few, you can count them on your fingers and toes, members of Congress who are doing what Representative Levin is doing. You have a congressperson serving the community who is one of a few who refuses to take corporate money. And while the number of elected officials who are following that trend is quickly growing, true leadership means that you are a trendsetter, not a trend follower. Representative Levin in this regard is a trendsetter. You also have somebody here serving the community who is one of a handful who is leading an effort to ban members of Congress from trading stock. I hope we get to talk about that today. It's very important. And he's also convening an anti-corruption group in Congress, because I've heard him talk about the links between corruption in D.C. and the affordability crisis back at home. Listen, everybody, corruption in D.C. has a price, and it's us. We as regular people, the non-billionaires of the world, we are the ones who are paying for the cost of that corruption. We pay for it. Every time we fill up the tank, buy groceries, or fill up a prescription. I'll give you one more example before I pause here of what I mean by that. In the 2024 election, the oil and gas industry spent $248.7 million, which is nearly 100% increase from what they spent in the previous election to impact the outcome of that election. I'm saying all this because we're talking about different pieces of the same big money in politics pie. Those pieces are corruption in D.C., the proliferation of corporate control, the growing divide between the very rich and the very poor. All of it, everybody, has to do with money in politics. Now, before you get discouraged and hang up on me, I want to say that all hope is not lost. If corruption and the backslide of democracy are the symptoms and money in politics is the disease, then the lawmakers who are following Representative Levin's example are the cure. I know that sounds cheesy, but I mean it. It's going to be a minute before we get this mission done. We won't get rid of money in politics by closing business tomorrow, for example. It won't happen this year. But the steps that Congressman Levin are taking by tackling self-enrichment in Congress, rooting out dark money, tackling corruption, refusing to cow to corporate money, everybody, this is our way out. This is our way to restoring our voices in our own democracy, and I really look forward to the discussion today, and I thank Congressman Levin for his leadership on ending corruption in D.C.
Thank you so much, Justin, for those great introductory remarks. Thanks again to End Citizens United for all you do. It's an honor to partner with you as we try to address corruption in Washington, D.C. And now I will turn it over to the callers for your questions. And remember, to ask a question, press *3 at any time. And to subscribe to my e-newsletter, press *6.
All right, our first caller with a question is Diana in Dana Point. Diana, welcome to the call. You are live with the Congressman. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, thank you very much, Congressman. I was curious about what you can do about the cost of education, higher education for our students with the May 1st deadline of kids trying to get into our UCs and our Cal States. It's incredibly unsustainable and unaffordable. And I've just been really underwhelmed with specifically my son's financial aid packages, being a California resident.
Yes, well, first of all, I completely agree, and I'll tell you that part of it is, the structural deficit we've been running in the state of California, and the fact that the UC system has this disincentive to have more in-state residents. They need, more out-of-state and international students who pay that higher premium to go to the schools, and that puts our own students at a disadvantage. But in general, the cost of college in this country has gotten completely out of hand. And, I have a son who's about to enter high school and a daughter who is in middle school. And, I really have been looking at it from a federal perspective with the premise that the federal government should not be in the business of profiting off students who are just trying to, go to school. And so I'm fighting to try to reset the federal student loan interest rate at zero. We have a bill called the Student Loan Interest Elimination Act, and we've been fighting for that for a while, because if you look at the average public university student that are taking out federal loans, a lot of it that they're paying is interest, and they're paying it over a very long period of time, and that's money that, they could be using for all the other needs in their life. They could be saving that money for retirement. So the federal government should not be taking that money. I think that's certainly a place that we ought to try to find some bipartisan common ground. The other is for our service members specifically. You have a lot of service members in our community and all across the country that they get a cap on student loan interest at 6% because of their service in the military. But the second that they consolidate or refinance those loans, which sometimes they need in order to access the public service loan forgiveness program, that cap goes away, and all of a sudden that interest rate gets jacked up even for those service members. So that's another way we've been trying to fix it. And then, of course, we have what's called the College Affordability Act. That's a big bill. It's a comprehensive bill. It increases the Pell Grant, in fact, doubles the Pell Grant. It makes 2 years of community college tuition free. It expands the public service loan programs. It cracks down on the predatory for-profit colleges, and I'm going to continue to fight for whatever we can do. That's going to get 60 votes in the Senate. That's the key. You've got to get some Republicans on board in the Senate. And so, right now I worry that you have an administration that is really trying to undermine public education. You had the education secretary, Linda McMahon, say that she wanted to be the last ever education secretary because they want to eliminate the Department of Education. And that certainly impacts higher education. It ought to be a ladder up, not a trap door to go into massive debt. So I'm going to keep working on that, and obviously grateful for the opportunity to do so. And, of course, mindful of the specific challenges we face in California that I discussed with my California colleagues, both here in D.C. and also in Sacramento. Thanks for the question, Donna.
So if you have a question on your mind that you would like to ask live on this call, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. Again, to ask a question, please press *3, just like Sarah in Vista did. Sarah, welcome to the call. You're live with Congressman Levin. What's on your mind?
Hi. I appreciate how you mentioned earlier the obvious corruption and pay to play that's going on in the executive branch with Trump and his family. I'm also concerned about the inhumane conditions for the migrants in Otay Mesa and the illegal military action in Iran. And I just, I'm wondering what is being done to put an end to this madness, and what do you recommend we as citizens be doing? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, obviously a lot to unpack there, and I will come back to the corruption point and let Justin weigh in on that. But I will tell you, as far as the ICE detention situation, I try to visit monthly, both announced and unannounced, to Otay Mesa and to the other ICE and CBP facilities. I've been doing this since I started in Congress, at least quarterly. But I will tell you, since this last year, I've tried to go at least once a month. And, I don't know whether or not when I go announced, they clean the facility up in advance of my visit because they know I'm coming. But I will tell you that the last 2 times that I went to Otay, once by myself and another time with Representative Jacobs, I felt that the conditions were, they were nowhere you'd want to stay a very long period of time, that's for sure. But they also, I did not think, reached a level that were inhumane. I felt that they looked as, a civilian prison might look. Now, of course, most of the people that were there are people who'd committed no violent crime, people whose only infraction were, the status of their documentation. And that was roughly about 80% of the people that were there the last time I was there. Of the roughly 1,200, give or take about 1,000 were people with no violent criminal history whatsoever. So what we need is, I think, the bipartisan path, I hope that's still there, is the Dignity Act. And the Dignity Act is a bill that I've been working on for many years with Republicans and Democrats. There are roughly equal numbers of co-sponsors, about 20 Republicans, 20 Democrats. And the bill would create a path for legal status. It would also provide additional border security. And it would hopefully, get us back to some common ground, some common sense around these policies, where you don't have this cruelty and inhumanity, where people are getting ripped from their families, children are being ripped from their parents, and people are just working hard and doing everything the way they've been told to do to stay in our country, to pay taxes, to contribute positively to our economy and our society, where, we want folks who are contributing to continue to do so. And that's particularly true in a region like ours, where roughly 1 in 6 in the service sector are undocumented immigrants. And I think also the same thing is, we have to get back to the original intent of ICE. If you look at why ICE and the Department of Homeland Security was created after 9/11, it was to deal with significant threats to public safety and national security. And it has lost its way under Stephen Miller and this arbitrary quota system that has been put in place, where they are going after people who have committed no violent offense, again, whose only thing is their status of their paperwork. And they're going now, and unfortunately we have case after case where they're not using judicial warrants, where they're going into sensitive locations, and all of that is unacceptable. And so we proposed what I thought were very reasonable guardrails that should have been bipartisan around avoiding sensitive locations, the requirement for IDs, and no judicial warrants, and no masks without IDs, that's for sure. Nothing that was, anything that any other law enforcement agency would not have to follow. Republicans flatly rejected any opportunity to negotiate on ICE or CBP. And as a result, we were at impasse. And then the Senate actually passed a bill to fund all the rest of Homeland Security other than ICE and CBP. This is weeks ago now, almost a month ago that this happened. That bill that passed unanimously in the Senate, every Senate Republican, every Senate Democrat agreed, fund the rest of DHS, fund Coast Guard, fund FEMA, fund TSA. Well, we are continuing to negotiate on ICE and CBP. That bill has been sitting on Speaker Johnson's desk now for a month. Also, the Secret Service, I might add, caught up in all of this. So all Mike Johnson has to do, he could do it today, he could do it tonight, is advance the Senate bill to fund the rest of DHS, and we could get that done and that partial government shutdown, and we could do it before dawn, and it's about 8 o'clock, 8:30 here in Washington, D.C. So, I'm going to turn back to Justin to talk a bit more about the corruption angle and some of the things that we are doing in conjunction with groups like End Citizens United.
Yeah. Gosh, how much time do you have? It's funny how when we talk about corruption, the elephant in the room is always money in politics. Yeah. So the reforms that we need to pass necessarily have to deal with taking money out of lawmaking. And what I want to say about that, it is endemic to the ecosystem here in Washington, D.C. We're not just talking about the White House. We're talking about money in politics in every branch of government, right? So, the reforms, for example, like the congressman's leadership on the stock trade ban, banning members of Congress from trading stock while they're in service, ensures that there is no conflict of interest, that a congressperson who's overseeing a committee does not have access to insider information that might enrich that person. There are people who run for office with the intention of getting rich off of that service. And that's the thing that we want to discourage and ban and stop doing. So reforms like reforming the revolving door, which prevents lawmakers from coming back and getting rich off of the service that they already did. There's lots of reforms that that Congressman Levin is working on with his leadership in the anti-corruption group that he's convening. And I'm really glad that we have a group who is focused specifically on ending corruption, because it does have a cost, and those are just a couple of the things that we're working on.
Thank you so much. All right, Dirk, next question.
Yes, sir. Next up, we've got Stephen in Escondido on the line with us. Stephen, you are live with Representative Levin. What's your question?
Hi. Actually, I kind of now have two. One with the corruption. Are you going to continue to take super PAC money? One, and then two, you've supported major federal spending packages and stimulus policies. What specific steps are you going to be taking to reduce long-term federal debt and inflation impacts on middle-class families in our district?
Well, Stephen, if it were up to me, we would ban super PACs altogether. And, I don't know what you're referring to specifically, but I haven't taken any corporate money, and any super PAC money has been done independent of any campaign of mine. And I'm proud of the fact that our average contribution to all our campaigns over all these years has been about $50. So I wish that there were more people that didn't take the corporate money. There are 435 members of Congress. I think there are about 60 that don't take corporate money. And I would eliminate PACs altogether if it were up to me. In fact, I have co-sponsored legislation to that effect, and because of the Citizens United decision, because of this Supreme Court, we saw another bad decision today from this Supreme Court. The likelihood is that they would find a ban on corporate PAC and super PAC unconstitutional, but nonetheless, we have to keep trying. As far as inflation goes, there are a bunch of things that I could unpack, and I'll take a shot at it. I would say the first thing, which is probably the easiest thing, is to end the tariffs. So, obviously, the president, has since Liberation Day has put a bunch of tariffs in place, and those have pulled about $1,700 out of the average person's pocket. And then, of course, the war, which I thought was a mistake, certainly the way it was conducted without getting congressional authorization, regardless of one's feelings. And I'm one that believes we should not have a nuclear Iran. But I also believe that going to Congress and making the case to the American people is the way to proceed. And what has happened is gasoline, groceries, utilities, all this has meant higher prices. And you have about 2 in 5 San Diegans that are now behind on utility bills. So, it's a series of policy choices that have been made that have made things worse. So energy bills specifically has been something I've been working on and have really rolled up my sleeves. We have something called the Energy Bills Relief Act. We have about 140 people on the bill of my colleagues, and it does 3 things. It reinstates the clean energy tax credits that were repealed. It modernizes the grid and rewards the utilities for efficiency. And it makes data centers pay for their own electricity instead of dumping those costs onto your bill. So what we have to stop doing is kneecapping wind and solar. It makes no sense because they're now the cheapest sources of power on the grid. And unlike fossil fuels, their price isn't being held hostage by the war in Iran or by the Strait of Hormuz. The other thing is the data center problem. This is only going to increase in the years ahead. And so that bill that I mentioned, Energy Bills Relief Act, that has the data center provisions, I have introduced the data center provisions as a standalone bill because the AI boom is projected by just in this decade to more than double those data centers, and utilities are passing those costs on to you, and they're going to continue to do so. That's not fair, and so we're going to fight that. We're going to fight the tariffs. On the cost of groceries, we've got to do everything we can to help people that can't afford groceries with the SNAP program that was cut by the big ugly bill, the big not so beautiful bill, and then also for military dependents doing everything we can to advance school meal eligibility. And I've been, working on a bipartisan basis with that to try to help military families with free and reduced price lunch. So I'm going to keep at it. Healthcare is obviously a biggie as well. It's horrible what has happened with the big not so beautiful bill as they've gone after Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, because when the premiums spike, as they are spiking for people all across our district, that's inflation just the same. So I'm going to keep at it. Everything that I can do to try to bring those costs down. We've got other plans on healthcare and child care and lots of other things, housing. I encourage everybody, if you're interested, you can go to levin.house.gov and you can see a lot more about all the plans that we've got. Thank you so much for the question.
So as a quick reminder, if you have a question on your mind, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the live question queue. And take a minute also during this live event, press *6 to sign up to get the Congressman's very informative e-newsletter. And next, we've got Leonard in Oceanside joining us on the call. And Justin, I'm going to ask that you listen closely because I'm going to have you kick off the answer. Leonard, you are live. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, Congressman Levin detailed various ways that Trump and the Trump family are profiting off of the office that Trump occupies, including jet airplanes from Qatar, gifts from every country he goes to, and the emoluments clause is held not applicable to him by the United States Supreme Court, and billions of dollars are flowing to the family, at least morally improperly. I don't know if something legally can be done about it. But is anybody investigating statutes or causes of action to try to claw back these gifts and emoluments so that the Trump and the Trump family do not benefit from getting all of these gifts and money and other things that no other president ever had the gumption to try to do?
Justin, would you like to kick us off with that?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. It's a really important question. I think a couple of things about this. First, we need checks and balances restored, and we need a Speaker of the House who will stand up to the president and hold the administration accountable. You mentioned you mentioned emoluments, and the thing that we have to have in Congress with those checks and balances is a standard for enforcement. And there are proposals in Congress right now that would prohibit federal officials, including the president, from accepting foreign emoluments without Congress's consent, and would prohibit the president from accepting domestic emoluments. Again, there has to be a standard for enforcement, meaning that Congress itself has to have the will, the Speaker of the House has to have the will to establish that standard of enforcement. And until we have a majority in Congress who believes that fighting corruption is a priority, I'm afraid we don't have that speaker who is going to pass a proposal like this. And unless Congressman Levin disagrees, we do need to break through with a majority in Congress who believes this is a priority, and I don't think we will make progress until we get there.
Well, Justin, you're exactly right, unfortunately, and there's another bill that's very important where we're trying to take an inventory of all the different ethical violations that we are observing and other violations of laws, and that's called the Protecting Our Democracy Act. This is something that we passed in the House once before, back in 2021, and basically the second Trump administration has validated the need for a law like this, given everything we've watched this administration do over the past year and a half. I think the case for this has never been stronger. So let me walk through some of the things that are in the bill. First is, directly related to the work I do on the Appropriations Committee, which is reasserting Congress's power of the purse. And it strengthens something called the Impoundment Control Act by adding real penalties when the executive branch illegally withholds money that Congress has appropriated. It expands the GAO, that's the Government Accountability Office, and their ability to investigate and sue the administration over impounding money. It requires the executive to actually report any violation. There's another law called the Anti-Deficiency Act, which basically is when the executive spends money that Congress has not appropriated. So it would require actually reporting violations of that instead of just pretending those rules don't exist. And it forces transparency about how and when federal dollars are actually spent by the executive. So that's the structural fix that I am focused on. That's something that I have been really fighting for, and it's in the Protecting Our Democracy Act. Second is it limits the use of the presidential emergency declaration. So right now, basically, Trump or any president can declare a national emergency and unlock these vast and sweeping powers, and that declaration can just sit there forever. And under the bill, the Protecting Our Democracy Act, the declaration would automatically expire unless Congress votes to extend it. That's how it should work. Third is the pardon power. We talked a bit about that before, but it makes clear that pardons are official acts subject to the federal bribery laws, and it requires the DOJ to turn over materials to Congress whenever a president decides to pardon their own relatives or anybody charged with contempt of Congress or obstruction of Congress. Then what Justin was referring to, the emoluments clause. So the framers wrote the emoluments clause to make sure that no president could profit from the office, and we now have a sitting president who has done that. And our bill would codify the constitutional ban against that and create real reporting and enforcement mechanisms. It would also suspend the statute of limitation for any federal offense committed by a sitting president or VP so that no executive could run out the clock and then use the office as a shield against accountability. And it also insulates the DOJ from political interference by the White House. And we need to have transparent logs of communication between DOJ and, the inspectors general. And we have to strengthen those inspectors general and strengthen the whistleblower protections that federal employees should have to be able to expose wrongdoing and so that they're not punished for telling the truth. The other piece of it is it requires campaigns to report any foreign contacts, any foreign officers to the FBI, and it clarifies that all information, Oppo research, contributions from foreign governments are illegal. They are illegal under campaign finance law. So we are fighting back. We are bringing together this Protecting Our Democracy Act. It is the single most comprehensive bill we have, and it's the post-Watergate era style reform that I think this moment will demand. And again, as Justin said, is this Republican majority right now going to let this bill see the light of day? Of course not. We all know that. But we are going to continue to fight for it, and when we have the opportunity, we are going to pass it. We are going to push the Senate to vote on it, and we're going to continue to stand for ethics and accountability from the executive and, frankly, from the Congress as well. Thanks for the question.
So our next caller is Kim from Fallbrook. Kim, you are live with Congressman Levin. What's your question?
Hi. So I'm a public school teacher who works on Camp Pendleton, and I'm wondering what you're going to do to protect our schools from the impending recession and all the legislation that's kind of working against us right now.
Well, first of all, Kim, huge thanks for the job that you do as a public school teacher. It's been my great honor to try to fight for the schools on Camp Pendleton all throughout our district, whether it's through impact aid or through direct appropriation. We were able to get funding for Mary Faye Pendleton Elementary, and we'll keep at it for all of our schools there on base and off base as well. And, it's very personal to me and to my wife, Chrissy. Our two kids are in Title I public schools in our district, right now, Capistrano Unified. Our son is in middle school. He's going to be going to high school soon, and our daughter is in middle school. And, I want them, just like I want every child in our district, every child in our country, to be able to have access to a great teacher, which it sounds like you are, and a safe classroom, and everything they need to be successful. And when the administration goes after public education, when Linda McMahon said she wants to be the last ever education secretary because she wants to abolish the department. It's not abstract for us. It's personal. It's personal. This impacts our kids and your kids alike. And, I've been following this for a very long time, and I have never seen an attack on public education like we have today. First of all, on trying to eliminate the department, only Congress can do that. Only Congress can do that. And, you have other proposals for billions and billions of cuts to Title I or funding for IDEA, for Pell Grants, for HBCUs. They've tried to redirect all the education funding to the Labor Department. They've tried to freeze the grants that schools are relying on, rewrite the rules to punish the districts that actually serve low-income kids or other things that they claim is reform, when in reality it is a deliberate attempt to starve public schools and push families towards vouchers and towards private alternatives. And so what are we going to do about it? Well, there's a lot of things we're going to do about it. So I'm on House Appropriations, as we mentioned. We are fighting every single one of these cuts. So the president's budget that was brought to the Congress wanted to slash billions and billions of dollars from K through 12, but we're going to fight to restore the K through 12 spending levels. And of course, the federal government is only a small piece of the pie, but we have to fight for that funding. And last year we were able to do it, and it didn't happen by accident. It happened because we on the Appropriations Committee, including me, refused to let those cuts go through, and we forced compromises in the funding process. We're going to keep doing it next year, and the year after that, and the year after that. I will just tell you, again, Camp Pendleton, since you're talking about the base, impact aid, my co-lead on that bill has been the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, the Republican chairman, Tom Cole. You have schools like San Onofre Elementary, Mary Fay Pendleton Elementary. Because they sit on federal land that doesn't generate property tax, they rely on impact aid. I'm sure you know that. And Congress has not fully funded impact aid for over 50 years, so our bill fixes that. We're going to continue to try to advance it. The other thing I'll mention is trying to prevent childhood hunger. That's something that we saw during the pandemic. So many children, their best meal of the day was coming from that free and reduced lunch. And so we have the Stop Child Hunger Act that I've introduced now that provides families with EBT cards during the summer when the meals aren't available. And we got a temporary version of that program signed into law in 2023, and we want to make it permanent, and we're going to do that. And then, I mentioned before the Military Dependent School Meal Eligibility Act. That's a bipartisan bill I have to fix a loophole that denies military families free and reduced lunch. And so, look, it's pretty simple. We have to fight for our schools, our teachers. By the way, for the teachers, we've been pushing to improve loan forgiveness for teachers, expanding affordable housing for teachers, for school staff, making it easier for retired teachers to come back to the classroom. Teachers are the heart of every great school. They were certainly the heart of my education, and we can't keep asking you to do more with less. So I'm just going to continue to fight every way I know. Legislation, litigation, whatever we need to do to fight back against this attack on our public schools and our public school teachers. And, I'm honored to do it, and we'll be in the fight for as long as it takes.
So part of the technology we're using for this telephone town hall affords us the opportunity to hear from you by way of a poll question. And I'd like to ask a poll question right now. Please use your telephone keypad to respond. This is the question. Are you concerned about how President Trump and his family are using their positions and proximity to the government to personally profit? Please press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. So again, please use your telephone keypad to respond to this question. Are you concerned about how President Trump and his family are using their positions and proximity to the government to personally profit? Please press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. I see folks are keying in their response. Thank you very much for answering that question. And let's get another live question. We've got Deanne in Carlsbad joining us. Deanne, you are live with the Congressman. What's on your mind?
Hi, thank you very much for having this town meeting. I cannot tell you how important it is to me to end Citizens United. And in a kind of adjacent question to me, when are you going to be able to throttle the Supreme Court's budget to force them to adhere to some kind of ethical standard? Every other lawyer in this country has to at least abide by an ethical standard or gets disbarred, yet the Supreme Court thinks that they're above it. And I think that that's wrong. Is there any way to help with that?
Well, there is, and in fact, I'm the one that introduced that amendment in the House. If I recall, it was Chris Van Hollen in the Senate and myself in the House being on the Appropriations Committee. And it's very simple. You are completely correct. The Supreme Court of the United States that we saw in full effect earlier today, decimating Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, they are the only court in America that does not have an enforceable code of conduct. Every federal lower court has one. Every state Supreme Court has one. Members of Congress are bound by the ethics rules. The president should be bound by ethics rules. We see those, unfortunately, being violated. You know, the 9 justices on the Supreme Court should not be immune from the entire system of justice. And you're seeing the consequences of that. We know, and I think with all of the things we've seen from Trump, we forget Clarence Thomas accepted millions of dollars in gifts, luxury vacations, private jet flights, a real estate deal from a mega donor named Harlan Crow. Samuel Alito took a luxury trip funded by a billionaire, organized by Leonard Leo. Should have cost him over $100,000. And look, it's these same two refusing to recuse themselves from cases where the appearance of conflict is pretty overwhelming. And the court, back a couple of years ago, they tried to announce their own code of conduct, but it's a joke. It's a joke. And the justices admitted in their own statement that the code largely just codifies principles they already claim to follow and has zero enforcement at all. It doesn't allow for investigations. It doesn't have any sort of penalties. Nothing. And John Roberts won't even come testify before the Congress of the United States. We're going to demand that he testifies. We're going to demand there's an enforceable code of conduct. And we do have a bill called the Supreme Court Ethics, Recusal, and Transparency Act that would require the Supreme Court to adopt a binding code of conduct. And as far as the power of the purse, again, I offered an appropriations amendment, and unfortunately, it did not go anywhere. This is a while back. That would have withheld the money from the court's funding until John Roberts is certified that the justices have adopted an enforceable ethics code. And I'm going to see what we can do year after year to pursue such an amendment. So there have to be guardrails on the Supreme Court, just as there are on every other entity. And we'll continue to fight, whether it's in the Protecting Our Democracy Act or another vehicle, for those sort of guardrails. Thank you so much for the question. And I think we have another poll, Dirk.
Yes, sir, we certainly do. So again, everyone listening in, please use your telephone keypad to respond to this question. Should Congress have the power to reject and rein in presidential pardons? Please press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. So again, the question we're looking for everyone's input on, please use your telephone keypad to respond. Should Congress have the power to reject and rein in presidential pardons? Please press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. I see folks are keying in their response. Thank you very much for participating. And to provide results from the polling, our first question was a huge yes or affirmative. The question was, are you concerned about how President Trump and his family are using their positions and proximity to the government to personally profit? 93% of those that responded to that question said yes, that they are concerned. And the question we just asked, should Congress have the power to reject and rein in presidential pardons? 91% of the folks that responded to that question said yes, that they believe that they should rein in presidential pardons. So there we go. Thank you, everyone, for participating. As I look at the clock, we need to begin to round out this call and start to wrap it up. But before, I want to make sure that we give Congressman Levin some time to provide some closing thoughts, please. Congressman?
Well, thank you very much, Dirk, and thank you to everybody that dialed in. If you did not get your question answered, I encourage you to stick around on the line, and you'll have an opportunity to submit your question, and we'll be happy to try to respond to everyone. And I encourage everyone to visit our website as well to be able to submit questions to us electronically. I will say on the pardon vote, that's pretty overwhelming, the 91%, and I think it's important people understand what we're trying to do to rein that in. So there is a constitutional amendment that I mentioned at the outset. Basically, the way it would work is if the president tried to issue a pardon, that pardon would then be submitted, the potential pardon would be submitted to the Congress for review. The Congress would then have 3 days to review the pardon, at least, and then would have to decide. You'd have to get 20 members of the House and 5 senators to agree to bring that pardon to the Congress for a vote. And then it would require 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate to nullify that pardon. That's the current construct of the legislation, the constitutional amendment. Of course, it's very difficult by design, very difficult to amend the Constitution, but nonetheless, I believe this is something that I would hope people of both the Republican and Democratic Party would agree needs to be reformed. And, you know, my personal opinion is that we see it in this administration. Others might look at other administrations. There may be a fair argument to make there, but we need to reform that power, full stop. So, with all of that, it looks like we are out of time. I really want to thank Justin from End Citizens United again. Truly honored to work with him and work with ECU. I really appreciated everybody's questions, and thank you all for listening today. And again, if we didn't get to your question, message me by visiting our website, levin.house.gov. I have an amazing team, both in the district, in Oceanside, and up in Orange County, as well as here in Washington, D.C. And if we can help with any federal matter, think about VA benefits or Social Security or really any issue that you may be having with the federal agency, the IRS, it'd be our great honor to be able to help. And you can contact us at levin.house.gov. You can also follow me on social media, and I hope you do. We're, I think, on all the platforms that I can think of anyway. Facebook, YouTube, Substack, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Threads. Our handle at all those is at Rep Mike Levin. That's R-E-P, Mike Levin. And on BlueSky at levin.house.gov. With that, last thing I'll say is our number, if you'd like to call our office so we can be of assistance. Again, with any issue that you or your family might be having with the federal agency, the VA, Social Security, IRS, you name it, our number is 760-599-5000. That number again, 760-599-5000. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great rest of the week.
And a real quick note, if you'd like to sign up for the Congressman's email newsletter, at this point in the call, just stay on the line and leave us your name and email address after the tone. Thank you for participating in this important event. We hope you stay healthy and safe and have a great night. This concludes our call. Goodbye.